I'm super excited that today for the Conscious Evolution, I'm able to welcome Niki Gratix for the summit. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Puria. It's great to be here.
Yeah. And I just want to read in the beginning a bit about you because it's amazing what you share, what you bring into the world. So Niki is an award-winning functional health practitioner and medical empath, helping people to optimize emotional and physical health. In 2005, she co-founded one of the largest mind-body clinics in integrative medicine in the UK. The results with patients at the clinic were published as a preliminary study in 2012 in the British medical journal Open. In August 2015, Niki hosted the largest ever free online health summit at the time on overcoming fatigue with over 30,000 attendees. Since 2015, she has spoken on over 50 large online health summits, reaching over 1 million people worldwide. And in 2020, she co-hosted the largest ever online event health summit on the topic of trauma and mind-body medicine with over 90 world leading experts. And basically this is where I found you. And yeah, it's just my belief and my experience that when we talk about evolving and when we talk about consciousness, we need to have a look at trauma, because in my experience and also working with clients, so I would say trauma, if you put it easy, is kind of a contraction in our body, in our field, and expanding in consciousness is an opening and expansion and needs to be kind of softness and opening. So we will meet parts in us which are dense and not integrated and are in the, let's say, are in the way to really expand. But I wouldn't say that it's a negative or an issue. I really would say, wow, that's a great space, because now it's able to come to the surface and we can integrate it, harvest the wisdom in our experiences and just enlarge and become whole. And I'm so curious, Niki, I mean, I see you make that.
Yeah.
You seem to widely agree, but you are much more an expert in the field than I am. And I really look forward to hear from you how you see this connection.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me on a summit on this topic as well, because it's actually an area I want to start to speak more in, because ultimately awakening, spiritual awakening, conscious evolution, a core, an integral part of it is the resolution of trauma. It's, if you want to go on a healing path, you have, it's almost like we are born into and incarnate onto the planet. I'm afraid that the standard of what our experience is, it is traumatic incarnating on this planet. That was the journey we all signed up to. So yes, if we want to evolve our consciousness, trauma is an integral part of that. And being part of this planet is recognizing how that's showing up, and integrating it is a key piece to it. If you're not kind of looking at that stuff, there's a kind of the spiritual bypass, as if, you know, everything is love and light and everything's beautiful and everything's perfect. And it's like, actually, no, it isn't. And just coming to face that the other side is just part of the process. And this is the true piece about loving to learn, but learning to love all parts of ourselves, including the bits that went wrong, including the bits that hate ourselves, the bit that where we have self-love deficit, all of that stuff. The hardest thing for a human to do really is truly love the self. And that is what trauma, overcoming trauma, especially there's a type of trauma called developmental or attachment trauma. That's the most prevalent type of trauma. the thing we can take away from that, it teaches you how to love yourself. That's what we're doing in that world in psychology. And if that isn't part of the conscious evolution, the path of spiritual awakening, I don't know what is. So yes, and perhaps if it's relevant, we could talk about there's a couple of different types of trauma. So the attachment developmental trauma is the self-love deficit side, and there's the other type of trauma, which is a sort of more of a PTSD type trauma, and that the two things are quite different. So if it's relevant, we can talk about that too, and the different implications of it as well, but just keep it on topic too.
Yeah, wonderful. But first of all, Niki, I would be interested, because I deeply believe in a larger orchestration of our life. So where things really happen, and experiences and people we meet and circumstances we are in, kind of really supporting us in providing all the skills and experiences and connections we need to be of greater service. And I would
Yes.
love to hear, so what in the first place, or what in your growing up happened, and in which circumstances were you that you were first of all really interested in this topic, and now became an expert and really do so impactful work in the world with your wisdom?
Okay, it's a good question. So what originally happened, I was in a completely unrelated field, like not in a helping field at all. In my 20s, I was a chartered accountant. I was in banking and finance. So I was trying to be the perfect son for my father. It tells you what it was right there. And I really didn't fit that mold, actually. So I completely was trying to be something to live up to my father's expectations, and I wasn't that at all. I wasn't a chartered accountant, I wasn't a finance person. And I realized about halfway through, while I was at PricewaterhouseCoopers, I actually had it was actually a spiritual awakening moment, where I suddenly went, oh, I'm totally a fish out of water here, and I shouldn't be in this environment. And I need to do something which is much more directly helping other people. So I was actually, I would say, very unawake and semi-sociopathic up to about 23. And then I had my first awakening and went, this is, what am I doing? And when you have an awakening, it does kind of destroy your life. It kind of, everything falls away. And it took me about 7 years to transition to then when I met my co-host of the Trauma Summit, which is Alex Howard, and he and I co-founded the clinic that you mentioned in my bio. Now, Alex had been really ill with chronic fatigue for 7 years, and I wasn't as bad as him, but I'd had burnouts, chronic stress, and I was on that spectrum as well. So when the two of us got together, there was a big hole, if you like, certainly in the UK and Europe. A tremendous number of people were in great suffering with fatigue, chronic fatigue, that whole spectrum of illnesses where there's just no help. The help is not there in the conventional side. So there was a huge amount of suffering. And Alex had really found some key solutions on the psychology side. And I was then training as a nutritionist, functional medicine, functional health. And I had the kind of that side. And it's funny because we both crossed over now. Like I can do the psychology work and he knows very well about the functional health side, but we needed this integral approach to overcoming chronic fatigue. And by the way, it's very much a spiritual conscious evolution pathway. If you do get a chronic illness like chronic fatigue, it really is the path of causing you to almost kind of come to your knees, everything gets stripped away, and then you're reborn, and you can't be the old person that you were. So we were going through that process, and then we found the solutions to do that for other people. And it just, the clinic just absolutely took off because there was this great need and an unmet pain that needed help. So we just had the solutions, and that's exactly how we feel now with what's happened with the Trauma Summit, which is gone crazy. We've got I think we're expecting over 150,000 people signing up on the Trauma Summit now. We're expecting it could even get higher. But it's this unmet need of people are waking up to the fact that when it comes to health, and not just health, but anything in life, the mind and the body are one thing. And that if you want, chronic complex illness comes about because we've had emotional and mental issues, and often it comes from childhood, it comes from the developmental time, and just being in the culture that we're in. So that's kind of part of the journey, was going through my own journey of recognizing that we need to have this integrated approach to getting well. And you really, if you want to be an evolved, awakened person, you want to have a happy, healthy body as well. It's very hard to do that without it. And the two things, the mind and the body, are one thing. So that was my part of my journey, but it's gone deeper and deeper as I realized, when I started to go very much just into the trauma side, like after I left the clinic, and Alex and I were always on good terms and we've come together again for this project, I really went deep into trauma even further and realized that most people with chronic fatigue have this developmental type of attachment trauma. It's all to do with the key relationships in childhood. And I realized how deficient mine was. The thing is about trauma, it's not always about what happened, it's about what didn't happen. So about people not being able to be present to you, to not being emotionally validated, for example. You can have physical abuse, you can have verbal abuse, the obvious things, but one of the biggest things is emotional neglect. Emotional neglect is an epidemic. It's rampant in our times. We're not an emotionally evolved, civilized society in that sense. And the pain and the suffering that is coming from that is this was sort of my story, really, is that there was no physical abuse in my childhood. There was no sexual abuse or anything like that. There just wasn't love. And love is an emotional, energetic thing. And that kind of, you need that. It's like food, it's like water, it's like vitamins and minerals. I call it vitamin L deficiency. And you sort of, as children, we're sponges and we absorb that. And when there's an environmental failure, i.e., for whatever reason, our parents can't give that to us as we're growing up. It could be key caregivers, it might not be a parent, not always the key giver is necessarily a parent. But when we don't get that as a child, we have to protect that relationship because our survival depends on it. So we can't find a failure in the parent. It comes to us. So we decide there must be something wrong with me because I don't feel good. I don't seem to be being noticed. I don't seem to be getting the love that I know intuitively that I'm due, that I should have it. And when it doesn't come, instead of as a child, you don't realize that it was an environmental failure. You realize you basically decide there's something wrong with you. And that's where self-hatred comes in. And that's where some of these core drives and parts of the psyche that are key to recognize and address whether you're trying to get over trauma or going through an awakening process. The drive, for example, to be a super achiever. So the super achievers out there doing that drive because ultimately we didn't get the love we needed in childhood. So we are trying to make up for it by being super successful, because if we were just successful enough, then we'll be okay. The overgivers are a huge part of the chronic fatigue community. Tons of therapists, mums, a lot of people that type fall into that category. And their way of dealing with not getting the love they needed in childhood was, okay, if I just give to everybody else, I notice that gets me attention. So, and then they have a never-ending sort of giving nature, and then the self-love that their needs are not met, so they end up with chronic fatigue or some other chronic complex illness. So that gives you a kind of taster about how we had to go sort of very deep with the chronic fatigue group, and then we kind of realized this is happening across the board. It's most chronic complex illnesses. I'm coming from the health perspective, but even if you have a robust body and good genes, you could still have all that psych stuff going on and be healthy, but you're actually still ultimately, your life is being driven by a self-love deficit, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And I love how precisely you can really bring this into our awareness. And there's just one piece I also would like to add, because what I also recognized, I guess there is something, I don't know if it's the right term, but also an passive trauma experience, which I realized, because I mean, often these people are also quite high sensitive people.
Yes.
And just as a child, maybe 8 or 10 years old, looking the news, watching films, seeing kind of this brutality, aggression, not loving environment in and letting that kind of really touch me, I notice, and I guess that's also true for some other people as well. So just the kind of environment we are in, where we maybe in the family isn't that intense or a lot of lacking, but I agree that almost everybody has not enough of this vitamin L. I like that. But yes, this passive traumatization, I don't know if it's a correct term, but is also
very interesting. Yeah, I totally agree with you about this too. There's and to your point, in some mainstream research, they've discovered that there are children that can be orchid children, and there are children that are they're calling the dandelion children. And the orchid children they're finding are they're the super sensitives. They're the gift. They actually have great gifts, and they will be more affected by a bad environment as in childhood. And that doesn't just include key caregivers, but also, you know, being bullied at school, you know, and things going on around them, like exposure to very negative TV shows. The orchid children, they call it being super sensitive to all biological context. So you'll also even find them, they tend to be more sensitive to chemicals, toxic chemicals, you know, bad thing, anything bad and negative in the environment, whether it's emotional, social, or chemical. They're the sensitive types. So what they found is the dandelion children, as they called them, are kind of, they can grow up in a kind of in a desert environment where there isn't much love, and it's a kind of bit arid, and it's not a really supportive environment, but they can still thrive. Now the interesting thing is about the orchid children is that they said, look, the orchids, they kind of need a little bit more greenhouse care. They need the greenhouse care. But when they get the greenhouse care, they outperform the dandelions, and they become more successful, and they have more gifts in the world. So I know that probably a lot of people who are on the empath side, who are spiritually aware, I suspect you're an orchid child. You may have had a rough time where you kind of just feel like you get more easily traumatized, perhaps, by things. We totally have different thresholds. We're born, we are different. There are different groups of people around. We're different genetic propensities, and there's most definitely an orchid profile. And often people can think it's a weakness, because I just feel so weak, I'm so affected by other people, by the situation, and actually it's your gift, and you have to learn how to work with that and actually bring it out into the world. And that's my story, by the way. I did not realize I was a complete orchid child. And what has affected me, because I have a sister as well, and I was far more affected by the environment than she was. So she was the classic dandelion, and I was a lot more of an orchid child. And here I am as a kind of medical empath and an intuitive, and doing a spiritual side to me. And just that wasn't the world of my family at all. But it took me till really late on, like late 30s, to accept that I had these gifts. And also it took me about 40 years for them to open up, because I had to do the work. Basically, I desensitized to survive. So it was an adaptive style. I became insensitive. Like I mentioned the word, I said a little bit sociopathic. I kind of did that to live through a tough world. For my sensibilities, it was too tough for me. So I desensitized, and I slowly had to open that up. And it was traumatic as I opened up, because each time I was like, oh, this is a lot worse than I thought it was. So just as you were asking about my story, but that's part of the kind of the journey and the awareness that we need to have. And orchid children, it's not a weakness. And if you feel like you're being more affected than, say, other people, just think about the orchid dandelion side. You have a gift, and your nervous system is actually set up to be more sensitive, to subtleties. And that's actually something where there's huge gifts in that. So hopefully that's a message of positivity for people who feel they're in that category.
Absolutely. And I mean, I can relate a lot. It could have been my story you just share. And there came a point up when I was listening to you, Niki, that was also this, I mean, for me, in a way, that's very healthy when you notice that bad stuff isn't good. I mean,
Yes.
That's one
Yes.
thing.
Yes.
That's one thing. And the other was, let's say if I can catch it again. Mm. Yeah. And I mean, I guess also many people can relate. So a strategy for me was I was really fleeing into the spiritual realms, kind of in my holy world on cloud, on a pink cloud, where the world wasn't that intense, not that aggressive, and all of that. I mean, can be also helpful to realize, there is something else than this physical reality. But I mean,
Yes.
to just escape to there for all the time isn't healthy at all. But it was, I would say, a coping strategy for a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then there comes a point where life knocks on your door and it's time to bring these realms together. And I would love to hear what you have to share about that, because I guess you will witness that quite often also.
Yes, this is it's a classic, especially for the orchid children, to disassociate and to kind of the consciousness comes out of the body, and we're living in this kind of spiritual realm a lot because it's rough, it's hard, and it can be painful to actually fully incarnate and embody into the physical body. So, but when you when you do that, you also lose your power on the physical level. So, and ultimately the body, it's not even going to be so healthy for the body, because it kind of, you're not really there. The body kind of recognizes that, kind of goes, oh well, we'll just give up then. And so that can lead to chronic illness and all kinds of things. And also not fully being able to feel your feelings when the human emotions, when you are sort of, you've done the spirit. That's what I meant by spiritual bypass. So it is possible to actually start to, this is also why the trauma work, it needs to be customized to the person. There are some people who've gone that way to escape the pain, and there's other people who shut that off completely and are kind of very sort of into the physical material world, and that's their adaptive coping style as well. They find they don't want, they'll rather be in denial and not know about all of this, because that brings pain for them. So everyone sort of will be needing different things. But one of the things that you can do, this is why things like embodied things like yoga, grounded body work, Feldenkrais therapy, breathing exercises. I had to do a lot of breathing to get my consciousness back into my body and to feel into my body again. The other thing I did it for sure, was the intellectualization of everything. It's another escapism. So anything not to feel our feelings, because that's where the pain is, but learning how to be with feelings and also be able to release them and transmute them, and just be able to deal. I think the most difficult thing we deal with is, it is OP, it's other people. It's other people. That's our big thing. If you think about all the really difficult things in your life, most of the time it's usually to do with OP, other people. This is what we're actually trying to escape from. And the whole sort of process of energy vampiring, like other people stealing our energy, whether they are putting us down, are narcissistic, are abusive, are verbally, or just they're sociopathic, not in tune with our feelings. It's rough being around them. That's part of the reason why we try and escape, or we intellectualize everything, or we've done that because we were just mimicking our key caregivers. That's how they cope, so we did the same thing. And it often is, it's not a bad thing, it's not a failure, it's how we survived. It's a coping strategy. But the amazing, what we came here to do, I believe, on this planet, we came here to fully embody. We did come here to fully get into our bodies, because this, from that place, is where the power is to effect change and be able to become an embodied presence, and thus being able to do things like this, like run huge summits, like write books, like get into this embodied state and bring presence into the physical body. And people will feel that, they'll notice it, they'll start to see there's something different about you. You seem to be more resilient, you seem to be very successful, you seem to be having a big following now, like what's happening? And when you start to embody that and you are the standard of it, that's when you can affect other people, not by doing anything, just being with them, just sitting with them, and you're affecting their consciousness. So that's part of my process about why I went through all the trauma and teaching people about overcoming trauma, because that's why you came to the planet. Actually, it wasn't just to jump out again. We came to 3D reality to have an embodied experience, and this is where you can do your work. This is where you can clear karma. This is the place to clear emotions that have maybe sat with you, that have been intergenerationally inherited. This is the time, this is the place, this is where you can heal it. This is our best position to clear it all through. This is why we came here. So trauma work is a big deal when you're often when you're clearing trauma and patterns that have gone through generations. You're clearing it for your entire lineage, and you're stopping passing it on to your children as well. So when you heal yourself, you're healing your family and community as well. So I personally, it's the most important work we could do. That's my view.
Absolutely. I totally agree. So I would say trauma work and consciousness work is what I just see. The world is more and more ready for it. I mean, the numbers of people registered for your event, and I just noticed that this recognizing that is an issue we have to look at, and it's not just trauma when you had an accident or rape happened, but all of us kind of have that in our system more or less, and also what you just said from our family lineage. I heard it can be back to 6 or 7 generations and be expressed. I also had that running in my system, as my grandparents were refugees in the Second World War, and I had some fear issues happening. There was nothing in my life happening which would make sense that I sense so much fear in my system. But when I turned deeper, and with the help of a health coach, he said, that's from your grandmother. It's vibrating in your system. And it wasn't a big deal to just be fully present for it, let it vibrate fully with the help of someone with me. And then it was done. It was one session, and it was integrated. I knew where it was coming from. I had the capacity to be with it, and it changed a lot of me. I felt I'm another person from before and after integrating that. And that brings me to another question, Niki. So maybe, let's say, what I would be interested that you maybe share a bit, because you also said this attachment trauma, and when we grow up, so maybe describe it a bit, that that people can notice, am I in this category? And then maybe pain, the journey. I know it's individual, but how could it look like when you recognize it, when you get support in it, and what can happen when you integrate it? What treasures and gifts can open up for you when you really dare to go this journey and have a look at it?
Beautiful. Yes, and it is. It's confronting work, so it takes some courage to do it. But I just want to pick up on something you said as well, just to help people. When we use the word trauma, you actually mentioned a couple of like what we call discrete events. So most people think of trauma as like maybe being in a car accident or an assault, or maybe a hospitalization, something like that. That type of trauma leads on to a diagnosable condition that's called PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And the point about that type of trauma, that's a trauma to discrete events. It's relatively rare, has a big impact on people, but it's actually quite rare, and it's pretty curable. So it's good for people to know that type of PTSD, you're going to be having symptoms that are triggered by anything that reminds you of that event, that discrete event. And you'll have problems with calming the nervous system, anxiety, depression, being keyed up all the time, but the triggers are that discrete event. So just for people who think they might recognize they probably maybe have PTSD, EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, is the frontline conventional intervention that's really powerful. It works really well. There are good standards of practitioners out there because it's conventional medicine, conventional psychology. So just so that people know, it's important to clear that out of your system, and we have tools that are really effective to do it. So EMDR, if you have PTSD. So that's relatively rare, and it's curable. The more difficult work, and this is where people like Professor Bessel van der Kolk and Dr. Diane Poole Heller, Dr. Lawrence Heller, it's the development, and Ken Wilber, we're sort of much more into the developmental psychology side, because this is where it's more subtle, it's more happening at the identity level, because, and it is trauma, because you mentioned attachment trauma. Attachment trauma in essence is, it is that love deficit. It comes from our key, it's relational trauma, it's ambient trauma, it's not a discrete event. It's being in this world and being surrounded by maybe people who are very angry or depressed or stressed, or the environment is full of that type of energy. And when we come into the world, our brains don't develop in a vacuum. They actually develop in response to inputs from the environment, from our parents, from the key caregivers. And if we aren't shown empathy and emotional connection, especially in the early years, before age 4, precognitive, before the brain comes online, we will also not have the empathy genes. We'll have the genes, but they won't be switched on. You know, we won't have the empathy neurons. They're called mirror neurons. So I can actually learn from looking into my mum's eyes. When we're young, before age 4, how does a mother bond with a child? It's communicated non-verbally. It's through eye contact. It's the loving eye contact. It's tone of voice. It's touch. It's sort of at the it's not intellectual. This is where we're such an IQ orientated, you know, intellectually, we value IQ above everything. And actually what really matters, what makes children grow is that non-physical, non-verbal, subtle, energetic bonding and connection between mother and child. There's only 45% of adults that securely bond with mum. Only 45% of adults, and that's mainstream science confirming it. So when you choose to incarnate on this planet, you would have known, like, this is going to be a tricky journey. So the way I experienced attachment trauma, it's like, especially if it's emotional neglect, it's just not being, you know, one of the things that happens when we have emotional neglect, which by the way is going to be present whether it's there whether you also had physical, sexual or emotional abuse, if there was substance abuse in the family, if there was one of the parents was depressed or narcissistic, or maybe there were financial difficulties in the family, not even your parents' fault, but we get ignored with this neglect going on. It's sort of, the child almost goes into purgatory, and in a kind of emotional purgatory where you're sort of disconnected. There's a wall that goes up where you don't really know who you are. You don't really feel your feelings. You're disconnected from the soul. And basically that experience, a lot of people with emotional neglect, this is where the juice is. This is like, if you don't feel your feelings, and which is the door to the soul, you can be in a completely wrong career. You can keep attracting people that are nothing, that shouldn't be in your life. They're not for you. They weren't meant for you. And this is kind of what happened to me when I went down the career path into banking and finance. And I woke up and went, oh, I had no idea who I was. I was doing completely the thing that has nothing to do with me. What am I doing that? But there was a whole purpose and a reason to incarnate into that family, partly to sort of help heal that family. And that's also, by the way, what happens with orchid children. We might not be in a very happy environment because we were there to teach, for us to learn, and the family around us. So this attachment bonding, this attachment trauma, it's when that bonding fails. And it's not just the first 4 years of life. You're starting to get those messages in utero as well, by the way. So if mum is depressed, stressed, distracted, while in utero, the baby can absorb that. You also mentioned about intergenerational trauma. You know, third generation survivors of the Holocaust victims have the same physiological and psychological expression of symptoms as their grandparents who were in the Holocaust. So it's absolutely, if you look back at your own childhood and kind of go, a lot of people just look back in their childhood and go, I think I had a pretty good childhood. And it's like, well, two things. One is, if you've got symptoms, look at what your parents and grandparents went through. But also, it's this subtle trauma, this kind of, we call them silent ACEs, adverse childhood events, silent ACEs. That's the neglect side of it. And it's where we get disconnected from our feelings. We don't know how to read our own feelings. We don't even know how to name what the feeling is, or we're just numb. And this is where the substance abuse starts. You know, also, if we don't know how to process pain, we can't name it, we can't feel it. So, but actually, it's it's eminently healable. It's something that if you just start to look in that direction and decide, I'm going to explore this, the doors will open, the right healers will show up, magic happens, synchronicities of finding out unbelievable things that you could never have realized, and then just you find out with a particular healer that a certain thing would have been affecting you. You can clear it in one session like you did, as an example, and then you could feel the way that you feel afterwards, apart from feeling calmer, more relaxed, more spacious, depending on who you are. For me, it was very much about embodying power again, because the thing I learned in childhood was to be powerless. It was powerlessness. And I think a lot of the kind of divine feminine, the feminine energy, that has been our bugbear. That's been our difficult thing, that it's the feeling of powerlessness. And I think the rise of the feminine and the divine feminine is going to, and art and music is what's going to save the world. That we need to get this message out and be strong enough to stop voting for sociopaths. That would help politically. Stop voting for sociopaths, but also recognize those behaviors. And I think this is the other key piece, that touching on something that you mentioned as well. It's not all love and light in the garden in this planet right now. And it's not even so much like that in our own families. And learning to recognize narcissistic behavior, energy stealing behavior, people who are insensitive, learning how not to just run away from that or go into huge pain about it, or to learn how to deal with it and to keep your head about you when everybody else is going crazy, but to be able to deal with difficult people and be able to stand your ground, say your truth, not jump into hate and blame and sort of tearing down the other person. Not that, but you will have to get your own anger. If you've been abused by somebody for a long period, you will have a lot of anger to process, but it's not about throwing it at the other person. One of the things I've seen happen a lot in the spiritual community, in the conscious sort of community, is we forgive too quickly. And this is where the work of Ross Rosenberg, who's a brilliant psychotherapist specializing in narcissistic abuse, he's got this YouTube sensation, he's got millions of views online. His work is great. And what a lot of the psychotherapists are trying to get out there is explaining, look, forgiveness is really important. Ultimately, you do want to get there, but people are doing it a little too soon. So you've got to really face up to the anger, the rage, the blame, and the hate that you have in you for the abuse that you received from that person. And I think the love and light community, as I call them, we can sort of not want to recognize that actually we do have, I mean, it's in self-hatred, tremendous self-hatred going on in the spiritual community, because we didn't want to send it out, so we sent it somewhere. But the recognition of that, and really recognizing that we're only 50% conscious of a lot of the self-hatred and the self-love deficit going on. So we really, when you can resolve that, when you really have transmuted all that, then you can turn around to that person who's been the abuser and you can say, I forgive you, but also you start to engage with them again, and you're less impacted by them, you're less traumatized every time you see them. And you can, then the real healing starts for the other person, because they suddenly recognize you're not angry at them anymore, and they're sort of, oh, she seems like a really different person, and their old sort of patterns aren't working anymore, they're not getting to you anymore. That's what it's like when you've come out the other side, because you're asking what it's like. Then you really are in your power, and you can say to very difficult people sometimes what needs to be said, like, no, that behavior is unacceptable. I don't accept that behavior. I have no anger or hatred towards you, but that doesn't come into my environment anymore. That's something I'm saying no to. I see the behavior, I recognize what it is, I'm not in denial about it anymore, but the answer is no. And that's where the evolution starts, and both sides become healed by that. We need the women, it's not just women, it's feminine energy. There's a lot of men with a lot of feminine energy, so it's not, decided by physical gender, but the feminine energy that I sort of talk about, feminine energy in the context, it's sensitive, it's loving, it's about social connection, it's about intuitive skills. We need the rise of those skills, and we need empowered people to embody those skills and start standing up to and facing the truth about a lot of sociopathy that's out there. And these, by the way, that sociopaths come from attachment trauma. So some of us who are the orchid types, when we don't get the love we need, we become overgivers, overachievers. We get a lot of self-hatred. It goes inwards. There is another group of people who, when they don't get the love they need, they do the opposite. They will start to not trust anybody. They have to have control over other people. They have to have power over other people. And they're the ones that will then be attracted to power positions and then abusing other people. So this is why, for me, this work we're doing with the Trauma Summit and understanding developmental attachment trauma is the key to social change, so that we actually, there are people, the politicians need to get to get trauma therapy, and they need to be told, like, no, your behavior is, you are, you're a narcissist, you're not highly evolved people, you don't deserve to be in positions of power. You can heal it, but you have to recognize, step one is recognize that you need to learn empathy. You didn't get it in childhood, and you have a deficit in that. So I think then the difficulty is, though, of course, if you might know, people, your listeners might know this, but it's usually the codependents, us, the orchids, that are the ones that do all the work. And the ones that don't do any work because they're perfect and there's nothing wrong with them are your I'm just being funny here, but your asshole ex-husband who's the narcissist, like he'll never get the therapy because he's always like, he'll blame you. It's not his problem. It's the therapist who's a failure. So this is the battle that we're dealing with. And I think our family upbringing is the microcosm. And if we heal what's happened, start where you are, start with your friends, are you surrounded by energy vampires? Are there people who you've been powerless around and you haven't really come to completion with them? Heal that in your core family, and you will be doing a great service that will filter out, it will ripple out. And at the end of the day, we're all humans, and it will hit the power structures eventually, and it will cause them to crumble too. When we resolve what's happening in the microcosm of our own family and the people around us, that's the core work that needs to be done, that will be the basis where the power structures that are in place now will crumble, because too many people at the grassroots level will be awake and aware and have dealt with their trauma, will be able to be in their power, saying no to unacceptable behavior, yet at the same time not going into that blame, hatred, denial. There's so many people walking around with a tremendous amount of self-hatred, and it's the hardest thing for a human to do, is love yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what I also sense when I listen to you, I would say this topic of separation is really coming to my mind, the separation inside from qualities, from experiences, the separation outside, where I would say, I mean, in my sense, in my understanding, it's so important that the spiritual realm and the realm of matter really comes together and is not separate anymore. So I would say much more spiritual people should also be active in politics or something like that, that it really comes together. And I also liked what you said, Niki, this that we need to come into our power and this self-love and feeling confident and really embodying everything, that the positive, the negative, the easy, the difficult, is so important in order to really tap into all our abilities, because some roots are in that difficulties, or some skills root in this challenges, and often people who have had really difficult upbringing and challenges, they are the most passionate, the most amazing and impactful people. So maybe you have maybe also examples where you witness such thing. And
all the time. And there's something called post-traumatic growth, and this is where something happens that may happen that will literally bring you to your knees, and it sort of strips you of all the ways that you were, and your life can completely be changed by it. And the beauty is that it's to your point, this is where it can create a tremendous amount of beauty, brilliance, empowerment in the world. There were quite a few people on our trauma summit. Andrea Nakayama is an example. She runs this huge functional medicine nutrition training school with thousands of practitioners all around the world. But it started because when she was about 4 weeks pregnant, her husband was diagnosed with a serious brain cancer and died within 2 years. But she's a classic example of post-traumatic growth. She said, wow, I learned so much in that process. I don't want anyone else to go through it. I will now, and she's, exploded. So Matthew Sanford is another example. The paraplegic is a yoga instructor. So he was in a terrible, I believe it was a car accident, and he, from the neck down, lost all use of his body. And now he's an inspiration. His book's out there and he speaks. He's an international speaker. Oprah Winfrey is another great example of somebody. So yeah, there's so many people who've gone through the process of being in a chronic complex illness, which can be life debilitating, and you sort of lose so much. But it's actually very similar to a spiritual awakening process. It is a spiritual awakening process, and at the other side of that, they become amazing inspirations and healers for others, and are the standard and the proof to others that it can be done. Not to lose hope. To be determined, committed, and stick with it even when all looks like it's going in the wrong direction. It looks like it's not working, and so on. And actually, Alex is a classic example of that as well. And it's part of how we started the clinic. 7 years of 2 years being housebound. So there are examples everywhere of this post-traumatic growth, and sometimes when really bad things happen, it's the best thing ever. And you won't feel like saying that at the time. It's like, don't say that to somebody who's kind of in rage at that moment, like, why is this happening to me? And we all go through that stage. But a lot of people that I know have been through really sort of, it is a sign of the resilience of the human spirit. Ultimately, children as well, when they get into adulthood, you can heal all of this. You can it's never too late to have a happy childhood. You can change your experience and how you relate to your childhood. And it's happening everywhere. And we have amazing psychotherapists, psychotherapy, energy therapists. Neuroscience is doing so much now to show that it's possible to heal pretty much anything. Anything you think you've got that you didn't get over, you'll find somebody in the world who's already had it, was terrible, it was really bad, and they got over it. And not only that, but became an inspiration to others. So yes, at the soul level, we are not broken. And I think that's part of the key that can help you get through the worst of the worst, especially bad abuse in childhood and so on. Your soul is the piece of you that is unbroken, untouched by the human experience. And that's a beautiful thing to know and connect with. And the spiritual side does definitely come into my work a lot with that. Different therapists use different terms for that. Maybe it's just they call it a part of the self that is healthy and unbroken. I refer to that as the soul, the spirit self. That's the beauty of attachment trauma, is that the gift can be that you do get connected back to something way beyond that you ever even thought was possible. And so that process of healing attachment trauma with your parents is very similar to reconnecting the divine, the human and divine reconnection. There's a huge overlap. It's actually one of the reasons, again, why I got into attachment developmental trauma and working in that. I was always about consciousness. I was always interested in consciousness, conscious evolution, interested in Ken Wilber's work all the way back in my 20s. But I sort of went around this route, and everything's a church. I think someone said everything's a church, ultimately. Everything's about evolution and spiritual growth. It might not look on it.
Interesting, Niki,
yeah,
because we really have the similarity. It was the same for me, and just, I would say 10, 15 years ago, I really came more and more also into trauma work, because I started with consciousness work, with meditation, and with Qigong and Tai Chi and stuff like that. And I studied for 4 years with shamans, learned energy work, but I also noticed in myself and others, also sometimes you need work really on the body. So I learned a body work modality where I had a a resonance with. And all of that together really is, I really like also when you said this, you need to customize. You need to have a look at who is with you. And this also, because sometimes I had this, you learned that and that and that, and but all together makes sense when you have really different tools, and also this ability to be present and to sense what does the person need. And I also loved what you shared, because it's also my understanding and how I operate is connecting people to their soul level is the beginning, because then you feel on an invisible but yet very deep level a solid anchoring, and you feel supported in a way. There is trust, and then also establishing a relationship of trust, and then a lot is possible. And I would say one of the maybe big ingredients or qualities, I would say, if you who are listening now this conversation and you resonate and you really think, oh, maybe I should start to have a look at the one or another issue and find a person. Yes, you need courage to start, because Niki, you said it is confronting. It isn't just a walk on a cloud,
No.
And what other ingredients would you say would be really great to bring together, maybe in yourself or maybe with the help of others, to start moving in this direction to integrate
Yes,
material?
great. Yes, and I just want to reinforce what you just said as well. I think it's a big failing in Western psychology not to bring in the spiritual soul side. At the moment, I feel that's a failing in the Western psychology, and it's a disservice to people not to encourage people to open up to it. I know it's sort of seen as perhaps a religious thing, and it's kind of maybe controversial for some people, but I know there'll be a lot of your listeners, I think, who are on the same vibe as you, who kind of already realize that the soul connection piece, the spirituality piece, that to me, it's the missing ingredient from Western psychology. It's the core, it's what will help you stay centered when you find the darkest part of you. You need to know that there's this here through whatever's happening in the outside world, or what you find in your own field that you didn't really want to face or accept. That solid connection with the soul self it truly is what carries you through. And if someone's disconnected from that, it's so much more difficult to work with them, because they've no center reference point. So just to reiterate that, the other key piece that I would say is critical. It's a message that I'm trying to get out to both the psychology community and the spiritual community. A key piece that is missing on, if you like, the ascension path, we could call it that. The physical body, you touched on it, the physical body. It's not just our nervous system. We need to pay attention to our physical body. If you want to be an empowered, embodied expression in the world that's making a difference, we are under a tremendous amount of environmental toxic stress and attack. It's not just probably chemtrails, it's EMFs in the environment, it's toxins coming in the food, the water, the air. And the biochemistry of the body is something that, unless you're a super illuminated, high vibrating person who you can just, take in arsenic and your body will just transmute it like the yogis, like most of us are nowhere near that stage in our evolutionary development. So the physical body is super, super important. And it's really hard to be doing some of this integration on the spiritual side if your body is biochemically out of whack. Now, the problem is most of us have had attachment and developmental trauma. Loads of us have got PTSD as well. That changes the biochemistry, and it produces things like a condition called pyroluria, where we have a rampant epidemic of this condition called pyroluria. It's an epigenetic shift that happens when we are exposed to stress, and we've probably 99% of people have it. It causes a B6, zinc, manganese, biotin, and iron deficiency. And when you're depleted, you need B6 to make serotonin, dopamine. You need B6 to make GABA, this is the feel-good neurotransmitters, the motivational neurotransmitter, which is dopamine. We need GABA so we can feel calm and relaxed. And we have a epidemic of mental health conditions going on because of this, what's happening on the biochemistry level. We have rampant blood sugar mismanagement happening. So people are eating a diet that's too full of sugar. That's causing them to be on a roller coaster ride. So their energy's up one day and then they need the stimulants. People are being diagnosed with bipolar disorder and it's a blood sugar. They just need to change the diet. There were so many functional medicine psychiatrists, almost every single one of them on the summit was like, you have to manage your blood sugar. You have to have a diet that manages your blood sugar. You need to be doing circadian rhythm management. That means the timing of your exposure to sunlight, to exercise activity, the exposure to it's to do with timing because it's circadian rhythm. Like not eating 3 hours before bed, making your evening campfire light, turn all the blue lights off. There's so many things, getting the chemicals out of the diet, water filters, getting enough sunlight during the day, all of the lifestyle and functional health aspects. That is super important. And I've been in spiritual schools where it's like, oh, it doesn't matter, you don't need nutritional supplements. To my cost, did I find out the functional health is part of the ascension path, and that is this is why we got on the trauma summit, we had all the naturopathic functional medicine doctors, the world leaders in that, and all the top psychology people, Ken Wilber, Dr. Peter Levine, Bessel van der Kolk, but Jeff Bland, Kelly Brogan, the MIT trained psychiatrist. So the point being, for people on this conscious evolution, you need a healthy body. You need to not have your neurotransmitters all over the place, roller coaster blood sugar happening every 5 minutes, not sleeping. If you're not sleeping at night, you're heading towards chronic illness. That's Harvard medical research. So this is the true kind of what we talk about bottom-up approaches. We talk about top-down and bottom-up approaches. Top-down, people are kind of getting in the psychology, spiritual community, they kind of get the energy work. They kind of know it's really amazing. And the people like Professor Stephen Porges and doing the nervous system work, things that stimulate the vagus nerve, like breathing, yoga, meditation, Tai Chi, vagus nerve stimulators, that's all part of it. But don't ignore the biochemistry. Nutrient deficiencies, neurotransmitter imbalances, thyroid problems, adrenal fatigue is rampant, blood sugar, female sex hormone or sex hormone imbalances. One of the key ways that happens is the pyroluria. We get nutrient deficient. Then we're building up heavy metal toxicity. And when we've got it in the environment, we can't detoxify because we don't have zinc, B6, manganese. That all leads on to things like Lyme, heavy metal toxicity build up, chronic illness, fatigue. So, it's hard enough doing the ascension path on the emotional level. Part of clearing emotional stuff is you do feel disorientated. You can go through periods of feeling depressed. There's a phase of feeling like you're in the void. When whole chunks of you start to peel away because you've healed them, that you can have an identity crisis. You don't know who you are anymore. So that's enough to deal with without not knowing that you might have a thyroid issue happening, a neurotransmitter imbalance, and you're doing all that spiritual work and you're still not feeling good and you're still not sleeping. Like what's going on? No, it's look into the biochemistry side. So don't ignore the physical body's need, the biochemistry and what's happening at the physical level. So that's a key thing that I wanted to sort of highlight to people. It's been a big lesson for me as well. Like, nutritional supplements are needed. Our diets are depleted. There is an attack going on, I believe, definitely to suppress the awakening that is happening. Mm-hmm. And so it would be denial and a spiritual bypass to pretend that stuff isn't happening. Mm-hmm. It's happening, guys, and we need to protect ourselves. So do your EMF cleanup, get your chemicals out, all of that's really important. If and it's almost like it was always going to be this way, that there are forces working against this awakening. It's not meant to be a scary thing. It's not drama. I'm not trying to be a drama queen about it. That there are dark forces. There is light and there is the dark, right? And it's real and it's happening. So don't pretend it's not, or try and bypass it. those of us who are on a serious awakening path, we are taking care of our physical bodies more than ever right now.
Absolutely. Wow, I so much love that you bring this into our conversation. And my sense is also we are multidimensional beings, and we need to take care of all these different dimensions and not just be in one and ignore the other, all the different levels. And just talking to you, I'm coming more and more into peace that I kind of was studying in so different areas, but I know all of them play together. And yeah, so I really love that you bring this all together and really dare to speak clear words.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I know. I will be doing more of this. This is probably my first one where I've talked more in the spiritual context of things. Like, this is the first summit that I've spoken on in this context.
That's a start, Niki, I guess.
Yes, yes, it's your fault. No, I'm just kidding. But yes, I think it's a really important, for me, this sort of awakening, ascension, the evolution of consciousness it's what's driven me my whole life, in truth, and it's ultimately my key path, and it's my next big step. Everything else I was doing was preparation for now to help what's happening, which is a great awakening is happening on the planet. And we need this multifactorial approach, to speak to your point. It is the physical, the nervous system, and the energetic together. And all of those levels are part of a awakening path.
Isn't that interesting that, I mean, there are many trauma experts out there, but when I tuned in, I didn't look at any other. I just picked you. And now when you share that you resonate a lot with also this, on this evolution and consciousness level, I mean, life is orchestrating very beautifully, so I like that.
Yes, I think I will be guided more and more to, I could have, there's an interesting career next stage for me. So the trauma work that I'm learning is to help people awakening. That's what I'm actually doing. Absolutely. So there's a lot of people who are just working on pure trauma to help people get back to their normal lives. And I'm like, no, I'm doing the trauma thing because I want there to be a great awakening.
Yeah.
And to help transform the planet.
And I just entered from the other side and ended up integrating trauma work as well, because as I mentioned in the beginning, we have to look at this as well. And just, we're coming at the end of our time, I'm aware of that, but I also loved, so I would say everything what you mentioned. When I look in the world, I would say, when I imagine a healthy and clear world where, where there is beauty, where there is honesty, where we're really tapping in all our talents and where we can relate openly, all of that, what you mentioned, needs to be cleared, and more people really realizing the fact in what an, I would say, polluted world we are on so many different levels, the air, the food, the environment, our mind, our emotions, so much pollution. Yeah. And I'm so happy that circumstances now make that so obvious that I guess it's hard to not recognize it. It's hard to not address it anymore. It's hard to look away. It's so much in our faces. So, and that actually makes me very happy, because then we can start digging and clearing and really creating another world on so many levels. Yeah.
This is it. I see that too. It's like there's been an intensification of the darkness so that we can see it clearly, stop pretending it's not there, and be able to acknowledge it and then transmute it in ourselves. That's why people like us came here. It was to transmute it, but a lot of us were too scared. It was too painful. We didn't know how to deal with it. But now's the time. The time is now. So yeah, this is the Great Awakening is starting, and it had to start with the dark night of the soul. That's happening on a planetary basis right now. This is why there's so much craziness happening, but all of this increasing awareness, whether it's just people recognizing that they need to get food that's clean, they need to get a water filter, that they, and then you start to express that through the choices of where you put your money, who you vote for, who you interact with, what we're not powerless. We can start to do these events, and they really can change. We've got a role to play. I do think the energy on the planet is ascending. There's a cosmic ascension happening, which is why a lot of the dark is coming to the surface, and we're seeing truths being revealed. A lot of the child abuse, the pedophilia, a lot of these very dark stuff is coming up. But we now have the tools. I think that finally we are at a stage where we have the tools and the timing for people like us to step into our power. We have to get into our power and take action. We still have to do action, but the sort of like the playing field got leveled up. So we got to, this was my journey, was like, okay, before I really was powerless. As a child, you are powerless, by the way, as well. But now it's like, that was old. So now step into your power, because now it's going to have a big impact, because the old structures are crumbling. It looks terrible. I mean, it looks worse than ever, right? And I had this debate with Bessel van der Kolk, where he was just really very, very concerned about the drugs that are being given to children. He's saying it's a lost generation of children that we're creating. It's devastating, the ignorance that's happening with what they're doing with children, giving them drugs to keep them calm, and it's attachment trauma. If you gave them what they needed, you wouldn't need the drugs. So it's heartbreaking to see that. But my view was, it's always been that bad. We're just starting to notice more than ever that how bad it is, and there is an intensification. But now's the time to step into our power, and we can transform it. So that's my key thing, and not to lose hope. Like, it is a dark night of the soul, and the darkness has to intensify. I hate to say it, but as a humanity kind of needs these really dark things to happen. Otherwise we'll just kind of bob along, because life's just about good enough that they can carry on with the way it was. Whereas with the virus that's happened in the pandemic, it's being thrown in your face that no, you just can't stay the same. We can't stay at this level of consciousness. We will destroy the planet. We are destroying ourselves. This is not a place that we can continue on. So the cosmos is bringing in the darkest of the dark to force people to go, you're going to have to make a choice here. We're either going to head towards a kind of fascist kind of direction this way, or you can go for freedom. But it's going to require courage, strength, power, coming into our power. But I'm all for the freedom. So I'm out there. I'm going to be try and do the best that I can to express the opposite, and show people that the feminine can rise again and take its rightful place, and will help to heal the masculine. And that's the feminine masculine connection, the completion process. That's what we're doing with trauma. You're connecting, the overcoming trauma means you're connecting the divine with the human, and the male in the female. And that's what we're doing on the planet right now.
I suck it all in, landing in me. I resonate a lot. I hope that everyone who was joining us that far, that you resonate with it. I had this image make like that. Start to find your action. I really loved that you also said everyone can start, everyone can do it. You don't need to be starting and impact 1 million of people right away. You can do it on your own body, taking care of your little environment, in your relationship with your family, in your work. It will expand just naturally. And I really love you kind of really giving us a push to move, to do, to take care. And what I also sense, that I'm so happy for everyone who is now being with us, joining this conversation, because I'm so convinced that together, the more we are and we inspire each other, we complement each other, we work together, we move together. So the tapestry and the web of really aware and honest and clear looking people which dare to move into action, coming more and more and strengthening that on the planet. I just guess we have a chance and we have this choice. I also want to emphasize this, really using your power of choice, what you want to nourish and what you want to just let die. Yeah, so I felt it was a very rich conversation. I noticed that, yeah, life brought us together on purpose. I enjoyed it very well. I really very much appreciate your path, you bringing your expertise here into our field of the Conscious Evolution Summit. And thank you for what you do, Niki, and all the best to you.
Thank you so much, Puria, and thank you for the wonderful work, the beautiful work that you're doing as well. So I'm a big fan of what you're doing with this too, and keep up the good work. It's awesome, and thank you so much. It was yeah, you have beautiful energy, so thank you.